I spent over 100 hours over the last 2 months gathering information of over 10,000 games from a niche card game, and this video is about what I learned. If you love videos about data, numbers, and potentially useless card game facts, then this is for you. I've been playing this card game named Altered for a little while now, and Altered has this unique digital client, one that plays in a web browser, specifically on Board Game Arena. And Board Game Arena, aptly named, is for, well, board games, generally. Board Game Arena is also the primary platform for playing Altered online. And all of Altered's games are visible for anyone to go and see. They actually flaunt the number of games played here, almost 2 million now. If you just click on that number, you can actually see any recent replays or games that you want to look at, and just click on them and get information from that game. Sadly for me, however, BGA, or Board Game Arena, prohibits the use of any third-party tool or bot or program to scrape this information. That would have made my life a lot easier. I actually use Board Game Arena in my free time to play Altered and other board games, so I was trying to not go against their terms of service and not get banned, of course. On top of restricting bot use, they also limit the number of replays you can look at per day. So I spent the last 2 months manually clicking on each of these games and saving game logs. It was an extreme amount of work, and I would not recommend it. I did manage to save over 10,000 game logs, and I did have some help from one of my friends who was willing to put in 10 to 15 minutes a day helping me pull this information. I also wanted to mention I did not purposefully exclude any games from this sample, so this includes tournament games, this includes beginner games with just starter decks, and pretty much everything in between. Trying to go for a truly random sample. I then wrote 2 scripts. So one script that parses all of the game logs that I have in a folder that I've saved them to and puts them in a CSV for then to use a spreadsheet or formulas or whatever you'd like to, review that information. And then I wrote a second script to go over that CSV. You could do this in a spreadsheet, Google Sheets, Excel, whatever you like. I chose to go the programmatic route, makes it look a little bit cleaner. I'm also making all of this data that I've pulled available to you guys. It's going to be up on a Google Drive link in the description. Feel free to grab it and write your own scripts or put it in a spreadsheet and pull any information you'd like from it. Well, let's move on to the stats, the whole reason that I wanted to make this video in the first place. So this, again, if you're an analytical person like myself, this is going to be the most exciting part. So these are the stats that I pulled. These are the stats that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to go super in depth with each one. I'm just going to put up some graphs on the screen so you can see what the breakdown looks like. So as I said, I have over 10,000 games, 10,180 to be exact. However, some of those game logs are missing a winner for one reason or another. So I don't have in the entire 10,180, I think I'm at like 10,050, something in that ballpark. But the first thing I wanted to mention is that the first player win rate in Altered is surprisingly even. I have the first player win rate at 50.86%, so 5,112 out of 10,051. Altered very well may be the only trading card game where going first doesn't actually matter. Sure, you have the very tiniest, slightest advantage for going first, but it's not even 1% difference. The first statistic I wanted to talk about was overall hero win rates. This excludes mirror matchups, as you might expect, and this graph is sorted from highest win rate to lowest win rate. We've also got some stats on how many games were played, and the first number is how many they won, second number is total games played. There are 9 heroes with 50% or higher win rates. I don't really count Subash and Rin because they're right at that 50% mark, meaning they're not really in the positive win rate category in my opinion. So there are 7 heroes above 50%. And of those 7 heroes, 4 of them are red. All 4 of the red heroes are in this top 7, which I think just speaks to how powerful the red cards are in general, and not necessarily the hero's power level. You'll notice there's one hero at the very bottom with less than 100 games played and also the lowest win rate. So small sample size, lowest win rate, maybe not a whole lot you can gain from that information. But if you've been an Altered player for a while, you remember Waru and Mac was a very powerful hero that's been errated and is now pretty bad, which is reflected here in this win rate. You'll also notice besides Waru and Mac here at the bottom, 3 of the 4 Lyra heroes, or pink heroes in this game, are at the bottom of this list, with win rates in the 30%, which is pretty awful with hundreds of games played in this sample. This could mean a few things. This could mean that the Lyra cards, or the pink cards in general, are low power, or they just have a really bad matchup against the most common, most popular, or most powerful decks. And I have a little bit more information on that later, so we can get to that. Also notably, there's not a single Ysmir or purple hero that has a positive win rate on this list. Every other faction has at least one with a positive win rate, if you count Rin, right at the 50% mark. To get a little bit more granular, moving on to the next stat, I also wanted to see overall hero win rates when that hero went first, or took the first turn on the first day or first round of the game. There's not actually a big discrepancy here between win percentages. The sample size goes to about half of what the first one includes, because obviously you're only going to go first on the first day, about half of the games that you play with that hero. One of the biggest differences here is Gullring and Toxin. So Gullring actually gains about a 7% win rate when they go first. Granted, the sample size is a little bit small, but a 7% win rate difference is a massive shift between going first and not. I expected there to be a much bigger difference in this category because there are certain heroes, or probably about half of the heroes, that do something special when you're the first player on a given day or round in this game. So I honestly expected there to be a little bit higher win rates for some of those heroes, but it didn't actually make a very big difference to go first or not on the first day, besides some specific cases like Gullring. This next stat is a little bit abstract, but I thought it might be interesting to take a look at, and this is breaking down each faction against each other faction and their win rates. So all 4 heroes of a given color against all of the heroes of another given color and their win rates. A little bit self-explanatory here with the graphic, but Axiom, of course, only has a positive win rate in 3 of the 5 faction matchups. And as you might expect, with 4 of the Bravos heroes being in the top 7 win rates, Bravos is going to have a winning matchup against pretty much every faction, and so every faction is going to have, generally, a losing matchup against Bravos. It did make me chuckle when I saw these numbers the first time and seeing Ysmir with not a single faction matchup above 50%. So purple is down pretty bad, atrocious if you will. And one of the last statistics that I wanted to talk a little bit about the details of before we get to hero versus specific hero matchups is the shuffle or deck exhaust statistics. So in Altered, when you run out of cards in your deck, you don't actually lose like you do in several other card games. You actually just shuffle your discard into your deck to draw cards from there. And one reason I wanted to look at this statistic is that I've heard many people argue that you see most of your deck in an Altered game, if not all of it, very often, and this just frankly isn't true. And I knew this going into it, but these statistics confirm that. According to these 10,180 game logs, only 420 Blaze It games had one person shuffling their discard into their deck, which is only about 5% of games. And there were only 54 games where both players shuffled their discard into their deck. Not even 1% of games. And of course this isn't a perfect statistic, because the only time that you would need to shuffle and draw from your deck is if you run out of cards and you don't have enough to draw, or if there's some other effect that manipulates your deck. So again, this is checking the game logs for if someone shuffles, so this is if you get to the point where there's no cards in your deck and you need to draw or do something else with your deck. It's not perfect. Actually, the Board Game Arena logs left a lot to be desired, and I can use this as a nice segue to get into a little bit about the nitty-gritty of what it was like to gather this information from the logs. The Board Game Arena logs actually exclude a lot of information that would be useful to know. They also use a lot of pronouns rather than explicit player names or references, so my script had to do a lot of interpreting to understand which player is performing an action at any given time. In some logs, it would say something like, "You draw 1 card." And then, as far as leaving things out, in Altered, as you may know if you're watching this video, each card has 3 different types. It has a common, a rare, and a faction-shifted version. And in these game logs, that rarity, the common, rare, faction-shifted, or unique even at that, is totally excluded. You can't see what version of these cards are being played in the game logs. And that's pretty important because these cards are vastly different depending on what version you're playing with in your deck. Additionally, about 2 weeks ago, while I've been pulling these logs, they changed the game logs to where they don't explicitly mention who the winner is. So I actually had to do some interpreting of who wins based on number of advancements made in the log. And that's not even perfect because there are a lot of cards, well, not a lot of cards, there are some cards that change advancements. They push people back. Think of like Sakurabru. That is one example of a red card that makes your opponent lose an advancement. They go backward. So they then have to advance more. So you can't just count 7 total advancements, which is the classic how many you need to win the game. You have to interpret who had the most advancements, which also isn't perfect. Because, like I said with Sakurabru, even if your opponent makes more advancements than you over the course of the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that they won. Like I said, the game logs leave a lot to be desired, and I wish they were a little bit more comprehensive. But I think I did good with what I had. And last but not least, the category that I wanted to include here at the end is a bunch of slides going over each of the heroes and their win rates against other heroes ordered from best matchup to worst matchup. And these sample sizes are not going to be huge. Again, there are 24 heroes in this game, so it's possible you only had 1 or 2 games against that given hero in this 10,000 game sample. I would take this section with a grain of salt, but looking at your favorite hero, you can maybe get some validation on matchups that you feel are good, you feel are bad, or the statistics might show you something that you don't believe. Again, all of this information is available in the description if you want to pull this information. Use the CSV to gather any of your own formulas or information that you want from this stuff and share it with whoever you like. And since all of the logs are also in this Google Drive, you can write your own script to parse whatever information you'd like if it's not appearing in the CSV that I gathered. I think that about does it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.